Definitions, labels, genres. What use do these things have for us as human beings? When we ask what something is, what is a video game? What is a government? Or as my husband is always asking me, what is sludge metal versus doom metal or drone metal? What do these things mean? Why do we have these words? And it's difficult too because sometimes the answer is very simple. We have Webster's Dictionary. We can put very simple definitions on things. What is a video game? A video game is a game with a video element. What is a game? A game is something that you do. Games are very ancient. We have chess, we have checkers, we have ball and stick, we have hula hoop. There's a whole historical, archaeological hole you can dive down in to learn about what a game is or has been in history. And some games are very, very simple. It's just like roll a dice and see if you get a number. Dice games are incredibly ancient. We have dice, different types of dice, from all the way in Egypt. So when we talk about like what is a game, what is gameplay, it's just something that you do. And I think that is what makes games an interesting medium and a unique medium. Because rather than consuming a form of media or consuming a piece of art like you would look at a painting, watch a film, read a book, when you play a game, you are doing something. The piece of media does not exist, a game does not exist unless you're playing it. And so that interactivity, I think, is the core of the game. You can play games by yourself with no paraphernalia, right? With no accoutrement. You can sit here and be like, what is around me? I'm going to play a game where I try to find everything around me that's blue, and that's a game. So games are very simple in this context. It's just a thing you do to entertain yourself. In early video games, we can see this as well. We have Tetris, we have Pong, we have Solitaire, we have real physical games that are being adapted to computers to be, whatever physical things you might need for the game. Well, now we have digital versions of that, digital simulations of that apparatus in order to play this game. Now we have our phones. Our phones can make calls and communicate to people, text people. We have the internet on our phones. They're information devices, studying devices, research devices, and they're also games. Millions and millions of games you can get on Android and iPhone stores. And what we see in video games as a medium over time, we see the rise of the RPG, the role-playing game, a merger of a story and a game, an opportunity to put yourself in the role of a fantastical element, into like another element. When you're reading a book, when you're reading a Michael Moorcock, when you're reading about Elric of Melniboné going on these adventures, when you're reading The Hobbit and you're reading about Frodo and Gandalf, you can put yourself in their shoes, but you don't have any agency. Every copy of The Hobbit reads the same. Frodo never does something different. Because you read the book, you can't read the book differently than it's written. The closest you can get is doing a fanfic, which I think is one reason why fanfics are so popular, is that it's almost a way to take the immutability of literature and interact with it some way, do something with it. So video games kind of address that feeling. Video games, role-playing video games specifically, give you the opportunity to have a story that only happens when you do the story. If you have if Lord of the Rings becomes a video game, which of course it is, And you're playing as Frodo, you're playing as Aragorn, those characters don't do the story without your input. You become, in a real way, Aragorn or Frodo or Gandalf or whoever, and you do these fantastical, adventurous things. And so it deepens that immersion, right? And you can argue, like, the characters in a book don't do the things until you read about them doing the things. But I don't think that's, I just don't think it's the same, because the words are on the page, the story is written the way it is, and whether you're looking at it or not, it's still happening. I don't think pushing play on a DVD of Lord of the Rings Extended Edition on your DVD player is is like an engaging amount of interaction with the medium. So I think this is the largest contributing factor to why video games are so difficult to make and why they are so beloved for consumers. I think that to have a video game that tells a story and is also entertaining as a game requires pretty much a skill set that is so diverse. You need every single thing you'd need for a movie. You need actors, you need a director, you need writers, obviously a full team of writers, and of course, because of the visual art aspect of a video game, you need artists of some kind, three-dimensional artists, pixel artists, whatever your thing looks like. It has to look like something. You're not just filming people, which I don't want to downplay filmography, but it's different. So you need everything you need for a movie. Hello, Marvin. And on top of that, you have this entire extra thing for implementing gameplay. And as we just talked about, gameplay is something the player does. And where this line of consuming a narrative and interacting with a game is probably the most interesting thing to me about how video games are designed. I think it's the most interesting thing about game design, because you can have games all over the spectrum. I mean, you can have video games that are Tetris. Tetris has no story, but you can put in a story. You can put in narrative aspects of Tetris. You can have the Tetris gameplay kind of be a proxy or a vehicle, because it's you have a goal, and narratives have goals. The characters' narratives have goals. So then you get something like a hybrid, like Dr. Mario. Like Dr. Mario, there's a narrative aspect that Dr. Mario is trying to combine medication via this pseudo Tetris-like gameplay in order to help people. And now suddenly you have this narrative aspect, but of course it's not a deep narrative, but it's a narrative. And we get more and more that way, and then we have things like Death Stranding and Metal Gear Solid, or Metal Gear, and anything by Hideo Kojima. Hideo Kojima obviously loves film, and kind of, sometimes to his detriment, depending on your taste, his video games become too much like films. You have Metal Gear Solid 4, which is a movie with gameplay elements peppered into it. And so the spectrum, my point is that the spectrum is very vast. And even if you go even further, or perhaps in a different direction entirely, you get visual novels. There's a huge community for different kinds of visual novels. Dating simulations are kind of in that vein too, where the video game is just a vehicle for a more literature or film-like experience. And what we call the interaction here, gameplay story integration, or a ludo narrative. The ludo narrative is the combination of gameplay and storytelling in the game. And I want to look at what forms ludonarrative takes, because I think that there are obvious ways to express ludonarrative, and there are less obvious ways that perhaps we don't think about so much. We were speaking about Metal Gear Solid, and I always recall in Metal Gear Solid 5 that, that opening sequence where the hospital is attacked and you are not healed yet, and you're trying to gameplay your way through this hospital and escape, but especially right away, I mean, you roll off of your hospital bed and you can barely freaking move. And later on, you compare it with later on in the game when you're healed and you're like doing the game and you're running around and sliding and jumping and punching dudes and all this crazy stuff. But you start in this extremely vulnerable position, this extremely compromised position, just crawling at a snail's pace and faltering and stumbling and not even being able to see. I mean, the camera's all screwed up. And because your vision is all screwed up as a character, the character's vision is screwed up, and so the player's vision is also screwed up. The character's coordination is compromised, and so the player's coordination is compromised. And as kind of Big Boss gets his feet under him and kind of gets his head right, your ability to control him also improves. It's a whole sequence I found so incredibly engaging. It was so desperate, because there's something when you have full control over a character in a situation, you have all the tools that you need to survive. There's a sort of, there's power fantasy. There's all of these wish fulfillment things in games when you can be this strong, incredibly savvy, incredibly powerful figure that just demolishes your problems like you wish that you could in real life. But there's also something to be said for being in a crisis and feeling powerless, feeling this struggle, and expressing powerlessness. And some people will say, well, I feel powerless in real life, so why would I want to feel powerless in a video game? And my answer to that is always, why do we explore feelings? Why do we explore feelings in art? I find it just harebrained and so frustrating when I'm talking to people about art that expresses pain, art that expresses frustration, that expresses and explores trauma, and people are like, I have enough of that in my life, I don't need that in my entertainment. Maybe art isn't freaking entertainment. Maybe it's not there to entertain you. Maybe there is a point and a purpose to art besides just enjoying it, besides just an opiate that you use to escape from the bad things in your life. And I think a lot of creators that create this art are trying to express this emotion to people who perhaps don't experience it and don't understand it, or do, and they want to feel some kind of camaraderie. They want to form some sort of connection with people with a similar experience. And when I am playing a game that is expressing a feeling of loneliness, when it's expressing a desperation, when it's expressing a helplessness, and it touches that part of me that has experienced those things, I feel so validated. It's so validating to see a character I love experience something, even something negative, that I've experienced, because it deepens that connection with the character. And the whole point of a ludonarrative is to deepen the connection and the immersion to a character. One part of ludonarrative that I think is often overlooked is the RPG class system. This is an extremely gamey system, right? At least I think it has become very gamey. People look at it in a very gamey way. I think it's gotten so And I'm not trying to say that like this is like a modern problem necessarily, but I think it's a problem that's arisen over time as a weakness of the trope, as a weakness of the mechanic. But if you look at like a very classic class system, you have your fighter, your fighting man, to use original Dungeons and Dragons terminology. You got your fighting man, your big bulky knight type character. You have your wizard, your Gandalf character. You have the cleric, your holy man, and you've got your sneaky boy thief rogue, burglar, Bilbo Baggins, the burglar. So you have these 4 kind of archetypes, and I think the real issue with where the ludonarrative with the class system is weak is because of our familiarity with it. It's become so ubiquitous that we kind of become bored with the basic tropes, and we convolute, we obscure, and we overcomplicate the classes in ways that bring us away from the narrative. But at their core, all of these classes are narrative devices. The knight has narrative tropes. The fighting man has narrative tropes about him. Is he dull? Is he dull-witted? Does he rely too much on his physical strength? Is he chivalrous? Does he have a very rigid code of ethics because of ideals of chivalry? Is he a brute? Does he solve his problems with violence rather than thinking through them? These are all narrative traits. And the gameplay of the fighter, someone who whacks things with a sword, someone who stabs things with a spear, someone who is trapped in a prison and solves this problem by ripping the prison door off its hinges. These are gameplay elements that reinforce the narrative of the class. A wizard, I mean, if you look at Gandalf the Grey in the story of Lord of the Rings, he's not there to speak magic words and wave his hands around and shoot fireballs. He never does this. He's there to be wise. He solves his problems with wisdom, with knowing things about history, with knowing things about the different lands, about different languages and secrets, and these mysteries. He's a mysterious guy because he knows mysterious things. And his strength is that he makes good decisions because of that, and he guides the other characters. Does he have magic? Yes. Does he have a more overt and flashy form of magic in visual mediums like TV and video games? Yes. He starts flashing fireballs at people in modern interpretations of the story. But the narrative of the wizard character is that they are wise and smart and mysterious. And if their magic is to be reflective of that, then the strength of the wizard should be that they know things and have mysterious tools that other people do not. When we look at a cleric character, I think one reason that the cleric has been so gutted in a lot of popular culture and a lot of modern video games is that religion is very touchy. Religion is a real thing. People very much care about their religions in real life. People believe that miracles and angels are real. And so to gamify that or to talk about those things could be vulnerable. But if you have a cleric character, if you have someone who performs miracles for their god, I think it's so important to have a narrative that talks about their religion, that character needs to care about belief. So often in modern games, you have a cleric character who literally calls down the power of a god to heal torn and rended flesh, and we don't ever hear anything about the tenets or the purpose or the doctrine of this religion or their relationship with it, or the lands, how it affects the land's relationship with it. I mean, in these worlds, God is real, and people who believe in this God are mending people's flesh together and saving their lives, and this isn't radically important to the politics and the sociology of this land. I mean, my God. Heh. Pun intended. But really, like, it's such a strong narrative opportunity that is so often abandoned because it's controversial, because religion is difficult to talk about in a sanitary way. And then finally, the thief, the rogue, or the scoundrel character archetype. And I think this is actually one of the ludonarrative opportunities that is most often interacted with in a meaningful way. I think the conversation about rich versus poor, about law versus chaos, about the need to do unscrupulous things to survive, to learn how to do things outside the rigid structure of the law, and is very relatable. It's kind of one of the fantasy tropes that is very, very relatable to the everyday person. Rogues, thieves, scoundrels exist in real life, and a lot of people have first-hand experience either interacting with those kinds of people or being those kinds of people in a society that has a lot of poverty. And so telling those stories, I think, is much easier and something that is grasped with a much finer clarity in modern ludonarratives. I think people love playing the thief. I think people love the story of the thief, the outlaw. And so just to kind of wrap up this thought about the class system, these are things that need to be reckoned with. And I think that that sort of narrative that you so often achieve with the thief needs to be reconnected with these other characters. I mean, going back to the wizard, when was the last time you really saw a wizard character that made any sense? They're just that, like, there was a reason that they had magic, there was a reason their magic functioned, there was a reason they became a magic user, and there was a place in society for magic users that interacted with the story and the setting in a meaningful way. I just find that it's very, very rare. And perhaps the only exception is in a setting that is completely given over to this archetype. When you have something like Harry Potter, or one of these other stories that's just like about a magician, that's about a Merlin character, where the entire story is then subsumed by what magic is and how magic affects this world. But I think there's an opportunity there to, I think, reckon with magic in a more real way. And this is where I would like to start talking about Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy is obviously one of these franchises that has interacted with all of these tropes very heavily throughout its lifespan to varying degrees of ludonarrative success. Before I'm going to start talking about this, I am going to plug Professor Bopper's recent Final Fantasy analysis videos. Professor Bopper has recently played through all of the Final Fantasies and has been doing a fantastic narrative and gameplay analysis, mostly narrative analysis to me, thematic analysis, over on his channel, and I'm going to link that down below in the description box. So please check that out. Professor Bopper is the GOAT, and really smart, really well-articulated guy. And looking at Final Fantasy 1, puts these classes in there directly from Dungeons and Dragons and does it in a very ham-fisted and harebrained way. The characters are kind of faceless and nameless, and they can all be thieves. You can have a very diverse party, and the only difference is mechanical. It's it's the old school game version of this class system. It does not take on any of the opportunities, the ludonarrative opportunities that the class system gives. The only difference between a wizard and a fighter in Final Fantasy 1 is how they interact with the fighting system, how they interact with the bosses, and how they affect your mechanical ability to progress. But in Final Fantasy 4, when the classes are assigned to specific characters who fit these archetypes, not only in their mechanics, but in the story, this is where I think we start Final Fantasy specifically starts looking back on where these classes came from, and, in Lord of the Rings, and asking itself, what kind of story can we tell with this? I mean, we have the Dark Knight, the soldier character, the servant of the evil empire, who needs to redeem himself and become a paladin and learns to heal people instead of using this dark magic, this mysterious dark sword, darkness ability, and becomes this chivalric hero healing knight guy. We have, in a stroke of ludonarrative genius that I always like to point to, we have Rydia, who has magical abilities from her ancient lineage, her secret, chosen people lineage. And she refuses to, or she doesn't have access to the fire ability because she is traumatized by her village burning in an attack. And so, we don't have this staple mechanical feature because of a narrative reason. And it's only when the character overcomes this idea that fire bad that we get access to the mechanical feature of fire useful for burn bad guy. And the whole game kind of plays with these different ideas. I mean, you look at every single character in Final Fantasy IV, and there is some connection to their personality and their social role in their mechanics. I would say that the weakest example of this is with Kain being a dragoon that leaps into the air for a minute and then plunges down on people. I don't recall there being a story reason that the dragoon exists the way it does. It's a very strange I should really do some research about where the dragoon idea in Final Fantasy comes from, because I find the jump ability to be just way out there. It's so every time that it shows up, I feel like it's very ludonarratively weak. I feel like it's very difficult to explain. Just to hop back to my other point about clerics and white magic, Final Fantasy also sidesteps the cleric archetype with the religion problem by making its healing magic secular. It's a studying thing, or it's a school of magic rather than a gift from the gods, which is, if you're going to do that, then do that. But I feel like Final Fantasy is definitely one of those games that doesn't want to talk about religion. And one thing that we'll find with Final Fantasy as the series goes on is that it is not particularly concerned with its ludonarrative a lot of the time. If we look ahead to Final Fantasy X, there is a very clumsy marriage of gameplay and narrative most of the time. If you look at someone like Waka, what is Waka in the story? He is a blitzball player. How does this affect his gameplay? His weapon is a blitzball. And I'm not throwing shade at Final Fantasy X. I love Final Fantasy X. I love Wakka. I think Wakka's a fantastic character, but his narrative purpose is his prejudices and his religious convictions, and how his religious convictions kind of make him a racist scumbag, and then he has to overcome being a religious scumbag through the course of his narrative arc. But nothing about his religious fundamentalism interacts with his character. The only thing that interacts with his character is that he loves blitzball and he throws blitzball at birds, and that's great. Titus is another character that really has no marriage between who he is and how he plays. He's given a sword in the opening sequence with Aaron, and Aaron says, "You know how to use that thing, right?" And he says, "Yeah." And then spoilers for Final Fantasy X-2, we kind of learn that Shu Yin is the primary kind of template that the Faith built Titus over. And so Titus's warriorness comes from him being at least partially a memory of a famous soldier. But this is something that's added on way later, and is, it's there. But it's not something that's explored in Final Fantasy X itself. Titus is just, he's a protag, and he has protag things that go on. He learns time magic because it's on his sphere grid. Another very, very weak implementation of this idea in Final Fantasy X is Lulu. I feel like Lulu could be literally any class, and you could just kind of change a couple of mentions of her black magic in the script to reflect that, and it would change her story and her place in the story. Not at all. There's no reason that Lulu is a black mage. There's no reason she looks like she does. We don't see any black mages in the story that look like her. We don't see anyone that looks like Lulu except Pain, perhaps, in Final Fantasy X-2. And then Pain is not a black mage. So I think this is like a real missed opportunity in Final Fantasy X, is that these characters don't connect with their classes, even though their classes, one of my favorite things about 10 is that their classes are so well defined. Other than the fact that you can cross over to other classes through the sphere grid, and then you have lines in the script like, "Hey, you guys are going underwater where Lulu can't go because she can't swim, apparently. And so Riku should learn some black magic on the sphere grid." Like, is the sphere grid real? This is what's called ludonarrative dissonance rather than ludonarrative harmony, is that suddenly the game mechanics just kind of shove their way into the story haphazardly, and it's jarring, and it doesn't make any sense, and it kind of just makes you raise your eyebrow and go like, "Okay, game, I realize you're a video game, but perhaps you could shut up about it." I mean, Aaron is definitely like the mentor character. If you think about it, Aaron is the Gandalf character in this narrative, and you could very easily have made Aaron the black mage because he's wise, he's ancient, he's mysterious. You could just have black mage Aaron, or even sage Aaron, or red mage Aaron or something, and Lulu could have been Pain. Lulu could have been a thief, for all we know, and maybe that would have helped her character, if she was like a street urchin or something. I don't know. The problem here that I'm getting to is that any of these characters could be any class because their class doesn't interact with their character pretty much ever. And that's, I think, probably the weakest thing about Final Fantasy X is when you're talking about this specifically. I'm not trying to crap on Final Fantasy X. Once again, Final Fantasy X is a great game. It's got great gameplay. It's got great story. I just don't like how they interact or don't interact in this way. And that's just the weakest thing about an otherwise good game. But we see this in a lot of Final Fantasy titles because, of course, Final Fantasy is always changing itself. Final Fantasy is always reinventing itself, trying a bunch of different things. Especially when it comes to gameplay mechanics, it's always like now we're doing. Let me tell you, it's like that. It's like your friend, who has thought of this really, like, he's got that good idea, and he's like, all right, let me tell you all about paradigm shifts. I got this great new idea. It's paradigm shifts. It's gonna change the world. And so, like, okay, now we have like this whole thing about paradigm shifts, but to my knowledge, paradigm shifts have no, like, reason to be in the story. There's no explanation for it. There's no interaction with it in the story. I don't understand what a paradigm shift is, other than this, like, cool thing you can do to make the gameplay different. You start looking at Final Fantasy 15, and we start having this action RPG system, and our hot prince guy, Noctis, we have Noctis, getting all these ancient king weapons from these different places, and why? Like, what is it? Everyone in this game just hits things with swords or spears or shoots people because it's just, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, they could really do anything with this gameplay and keep the story exactly how it is and just have them not interact. Or maybe have them interact better with a different system. It just bothers me. Regardless of how you feel about either, if you think that the gameplay is really good or you think that the story is really good, they're not married in an interesting way. Moving backwards on the time scale, going back to Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy IX is one of the titles that goes back to the class system. Every character has a very rigid, more rigid than Final Fantasy X even, a very, very rigid class. They are archetypes. They're the classic archetypes. And I think this game really does, perhaps, the best at connecting the classes to the characters narratively. We have Zidane, who is, in his profession, a thief. He's an orphan. He's an urchin. He had to steal to survive. He got brought in by a thief organization that he's a part of. And so his character is that he's a thief, and he can steal things, and he uses knives and thief swords. Okay? And there's also this mystery to him, because, of course, in the story, Zidane has this mysterious background. He's an alien. He's a monkey alien. And so when he goes into trance, he becomes this strange monkey alien. And so, like, even that is kind of, it's ludonarratively harmonic. Vivi, of course, has a fantastic connection. I mean, compare Vivi with Lulu. How we were talking about how Lulu's black mage status doesn't interact with her at all. Vivi, it does. Final Fantasy IX has a narrative origin for black mages, a narrative reason for black mages being what they are. And Vivi interacts with that narrative theme through his class in an extremely profound way. Final Fantasy IX also has the problem with white magic where it's not clear why characters have white magic. The two summoners have white magic, so, like, is white magic connected to the summoner blood? Is white magic and summoner magic connected narratively? But we see people like Beatrix using white magic through being like a paladin archetype. And so is it, where is it coming from? But of course, summoning. Summoning is it's a hereditary trait the lineage and the heritage of the summoners is an important story plot, and so the two characters who are narrative connected to that plot have the mechanical summoning ability. We have Steiner. Steiner's a knight, which is perhaps people consider like the most. He hits things with a sword and he wears armor. Like that's his class. But even that narratively connects to Steiner as a person. He's a brute. He's kind of simple-minded. He's just a soldier. He is blindly loyal. He's kind of blindly arrogant. He solves issues by being a big dude in armor with a sword in the story. So even that connects ludonarratively. We have, and this game even tries to solve my earlier problem I was mentioning in Final Fantasy IV with Dragoons, where Dragoons, it's like a special type of knight from Burmecia. Only knights from Burmecia have this fighting style where they leap into the air and then plunge down on people with their spears. This is like a Burmecian trait, this Burmecian knight trait that connects with dragons and dragon magic, and so Freya also has this dragon magic stuff that she does. It's like it's a heritage thing. It connects with her people. It's a little bit undercooked, but it's there. There's a connection. There's a ludonarrative connection there. Whether it's super strong or really fleshed out is questionable, but it's there. There is a reason for her to have these abilities, as tenuous as it may be. Quina is also Quina and Amarant are characters who are often criticized for their narrative weakness. But again, just like with Freya, there is a connection that you can draw. Quina, she's a gourmand. She eats frogs. She eats monsters. She gains abilities from eating these monsters by getting monster abilities via being a blue mage. She wields a giant fork. Because she eats things. It's weak. It's a weak connection, but it's there. There's a narrative reason for her to do these things and be this way. Amarant is a edgelord bounty hunter guy, so he has ninja. He throws things at people. This one's just weak. Amarant's a really weak character. I like Amarant a lot. I like using him. I think he's mechanically interesting, but man, this game doesn't know what to do with him at all. It's really... it's weak. I'm going to stop talking about Final Fantasy IX for a second. My point is that the opportunities for ludonarrative, the opportunities to marry the mechanics of your game with the story of your game, is the biggest opportunity that you have with video games as a medium. Is your game stupid if it does not interact with this opportunity? Is your game stupid if you focus all your time on making a mechanically interesting card game and you completely, there's no story, there's no characters, there's no arcs, there's no and of course if you don't have any of those things, there's no interaction between the narrative and the game. Does that make your game bad? No. I love games like that. I love deck builders. I love card games. I love games that feel good to play. Very cool. Very awesome. And I love stories. I love TV. I love films. I love, to a somewhat lesser extent, I love Metal Gear Solid. I love Metal Gear Solid 4. But, and visual novels, and I just love a good story. I just think that if you're going to make a video game and you want it to have a narrative and you want it to play interestingly, it is worth a very large portion of your time and energy to think very hard about how you can marry these ideas. How has it been done in games to great success? How hasn't it been done yet in games that are yet to be made? And what can you offer your players to make them invested in these characters, not just narratively, but in how they interact mechanically with those characters and with the story? If you want to talk to me live about video games and why video games are good and how video games could be better, I stream over on Twitch at Saga Goblin is our brand. There is a Discord, there is a Facebook page. Come and follow us, come and start a conversation. I love talking with people. I love talking too much. I love hearing people's opinions, dissenting opinions, consenting opinions. We would love to have you. So, like, follow, and subscribe, and God, I hate ending videos. Goodbye.